Hello, everybody. Yukiro is here with another Stories Time Saturday. We have managed to get to chapter 10, which is not bad, not bad at all. We will be trying to finish this chapter. Maybe we will also get on to chapter 11 as well. This is actually the second time I've tried to record this video because, for some reason, when it was recording, it didn't record a whole, paragraph or more. So yeah, I had to kind of just try again, I guess. All good, all good. It wouldn't be a Yukiro video if there wasn't scuff somewhere. Even if you can't see it, scuff happens. um, yeah. So we managed to, the last time we read a chapter, the party had already managed to escape from the bandits and everything, and they were taking a nice deserved break, and they were getting to know each other a little bit more. Well, Fenrir decided he was going to get drunk, because he deserved it after the day he had. So yeah, we get to meet my favourite character, in this chapter. I don't know why he's my favourite. Fenrir is also my favorite. I like them all, to be honest. They're all my favorites. I especially like this one because he's just awesome. You'll see what I mean. So let's get on with it, shall we? As a small group made their way out of the inn, Fenrir adjusted his sheath to a more ideal location. He had thought of getting another sword so that he wouldn't have a knight sword on display, since he was not wearing the correct armor to match. However, he had decided against it after some thought. He was going home, so there was a smaller need to pretend he was just a commoner than when he had left on his adventure. Lynette watched Fenrir as he held his head. She held back a chuckle, as she realized he was still suffering from his hangover. The way he reacted was evidence that he rarely had the pleasure to drink to the extent he probably had. She rolled her eyes, shook her head, and then smiled to herself. She knew that in all honesty she would have done no better in his position. Her people did not venture out into towns and never drank. She wasn't sure if other clans were different, but hers avoided humans as much as possible. Her attention soon shifted to Arius, who was fairly quiet, and Lynette noticed he would often fidget with his wrist, evidence that he missed the bracelet that the bandits had stolen off and sold off. Lynette wondered if he preferred not to use his magic at all, or if the silver merely dampened it rather than stripped it completely. Maybe it depended on how much silver was used in the item a mage wore. She wanted to ask, but she wasn't sure if Arius wanted to talk about it, and Fenrir was too busy feeling sorry for himself. When Fenrir was ready to leave, he said his goodbyes to Roy and headed towards the centre of town. Since the bandits had taken his horse and camping equipment along with it, he needed new ones. Flanthist was only a day's ride away, but at least 2 by foot, 3 if they went slow enough. Fenrir told the group he would make a detour to the stable so that he could compensate the stable master for the loss of the horse. Luckily, Fenrir had been wise enough to leave his coin bag with Roy before he had left for the catacombs. As the 3 neared the market, however, Fenrir suddenly seemed to panic. Lynette watched him as he suddenly turned to face her and Arius and said with upright eyes, "Run." He didn't wait for either to respond before he clumsily began to run away from some danger or other. Lynette was confused, thinking at first it was the bandits. However, when she looked around, she saw none of them, and Arius was rather calm. "Run for what?" she asked Arius, who just shrugged his shoulders. "We don't have to run," he said softly as he watched Fenrir trip over his own feet. He then turned around and bowed his head to someone else. Lynette followed Arius's gaze and noticed a rather tanned man, about Fenrir's age. He had light brown short hair, dark brown eyes, and a few scars on his face. The armour he wore was obviously that of the King's Knights, and he looked upset, or perhaps furious was a better word. "You," the man yelled, his attention solely upon Fenrir. "I am going to kill you." He pointed an accusing finger towards Fenrir, then drew his blade. As confused as she was, Lynette did not like the threat he was making to Fenrir, and she went to draw her own blade. Arius stopped her, however, and shook his head. "You best not get involved," Arius whispered to her. "That's the Knight Captain, Lord Vaughan." "But you cannot threaten people like that," Lynette growled, and Arius once more shook his head, but said nothing else on the matter. Fenrir had managed to get back on his own feet at this point, and he drew his own blade. He, however, just winced, and with a whine he said, "Please, not so loud, I have a headache." This seemed to only further anger Vaughan as his nostrils flared. "I'm about to give you a headache, you bastard." Sounds of blades hitting one another bounced off the buildings as Vaughan and Fenrir came to blows. As they fought, a small gathering of spectators began to gather round the area. Lynette watched the two rather dumbfounded. She was surprised Fenrir had managed to block most of his attacker's blows, despite being so hung over. Still, she couldn't ignore the fact that Vaughan was not holding back, and that he was easily overpowering Fenrir, despite the ferocity of the fight. Fenrir didn't act as if his life was in any danger, and this puzzled her. Further, as if noticing her confusion, Arius explained, "You have to remember, they know one another. Lord Vaughan won't kill him." Nodding slowly, Lynette continued to watch the two fight it out. Even when Fenrir looked like he had gained ground, Vaughan somehow managed to push him back. Part of her wanted to tell Fenrir to stop goofing off and fight properly, but she could tell he was giving as much effort as he could in his current situation. She had not seen him fight, even when in the catacombs, so she was surprised at just how much talent he actually possessed, even if he was losing. It didn't take long for Vaughan to force Fenrir to lose his blade, and then pushed him to the ground. Held the blade to Fenrir's face for a moment, then sheathed it. "Pathetic," Vaughan said as he looked down at Fenrir. "When we get home, you will hone your skills, understand?" "Is that before or after you've shackled me?" Fenrir asked, grinning up at Vaughan, who was not amused in the slightest. "Don't make me actually hit you, fool," Vaughan replied, offering his hand to help him back up to his feet. As Fenrir took the offered hand, Vaughan's expression softened somewhat. "Just look at you. It looks as though you haven't bathed in days. Your hair is a mess. Why do you look like you've been rolling around in the dust? Just what have you been doing?" Fenrir closed one eye as Vaughan began to tidy up his hair, and removing the dirt still clinging to it. "I have washed, but I didn't have time for a proper bath," he said, allowing the other man to fuss over him. Lynette watched the two curiously. So far, most people tended to avoid any contact with Fenrir, and they were overly polite, but not Vaughan. His switch from an angry warrior to an almost motherly was endearing. Even Arya seemed surprised by the man's quick change of demeanour. "Vaughan," Fenrir said after a moment of allowing the man to fuss over him. "Enough now. Starting to embarrass me in front of the others, and people are watching." Vaughan sighed. He did as he was told. He then finally looked back towards Lynette and Arius. Both he eyed up and down suspiciously before he looked back to Fenrir and said, "So tell me what drove you to go missing for days this time? I'm very curious. Can we at least get back to the inn? I'd rather not talk about everything in the open, unless you attack me again," Fenrir said with a playful wink. "What about the items you needed, sir?" Arius said, glancing towards the market. Fenrir shrugged a little. "Knowing Vaughan, he brought spares," he said, looking at the slightly taller man with a hopeful smile. With a serious look, Vaughan said simply, "Of course. Without me, you would be lost. I'm half surprised I didn't find you half naked, caked in dirt, and eating your small clothes." "Thank you for the vote of confidence," Fenrir grumbled. Once they got back to the inn, Vroid did not seem fazed by the return, and even less so by Vaughan's presence. The two shook hands, both offering the other warm and friendly smiles. "Would you get one of the girls to run a bath?" Vaughan said as he motioned with his head towards Fenrir. "His Majesty is as filthy as an urchin. I understand he's trying to be incognito, but this is absolutely unforgivable. I'll send for the knights to assemble. I brought his proper clothes with me, so there's no longer need for him to pretend any further. Lynette's ears twitched as she listened to Vaughan. Her gaze then shifted to Fenrir, who was trying to stop Vaughan from saying anything and failing. You! She yelled, her turn now to point an accusing finger at Fenrir. You lied to me! You're not a blasted knight! She then glared at Arius and said, And you knew all this time. Why didn't you tell me that he was the damned king? Vaughan raised an eyebrow, then glanced at Fenrir. You didn't tell her? He asked, though he had no remorse for giving up Fenrir's secret at all. Fenrir pouted and said softly, She made it clear she hated the king, so I didn't have the heart to tell her it was me she hated. He then looked over to Lynette and offered an apologetic smile. He then said, And technically speaking, I didn't lie to you. You made the assumption yourself. I just didn't correct you. I'm sorry for not saying anything sooner, and don't be mad at Arius. I told him not to say anything. You see, I actually liked you treating me like a normal person, and didn't want that to change. Lynette folded her arms in annoyance at him, but soon her anger turned to embarrassment. I said really harsh things about you, without realizing it was you I was insulting. So why are you being nice about it? She said, her cheeks flushing a little. Fenrir shrugged a little. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, then said gently, You have every reason to act the way you do to us humans, especially the king, me. In our past, we humans enslaved your people, and while it is true my ancestor did indeed free them from such a life, my people still do not treat your people any better now than they used to. There are a lot of improvements to be made, and I cannot fault you for your hatred and distrust. With a sigh, Lynette nodded slowly. I understand. You are doing the best you can to correct centuries of prejudice between our people, and working with nobles who insult you behind your back. I suppose it cannot be easy being a king. I forgive you, Fenrir, she said, rubbing her arm awkwardly. You have my thanks, Fenrir said happily. Vaughan huffed in annoyance as he returned from ordering a messenger to gather his knights. He gave Lynette a rather unimpressed look and said firmly to her, You should not be so familiar with him from here on out. From now on, you must address him correctly. Lynette gave Vaughan a narrowed look. He's not my king, she said through gritted teeth. Vaughan stepped up to Lynette, serious conviction shone upon his face. He stared at her for a moment before saying quite firmly, I do not care if you consider yourself without human rule, but you must conduct yourself correctly within his lands. If this is an issue, leave. Fenrir quickly moved to stand between the two. Now, that is enough, both of you. The last thing I want is for you two getting into a heated argument because of me, he said, trying to calm them both down. Vaughan, please don't make Lynette angry. I know you'd like things to be done by the book, and honestly, I love that about you, even if it means I get lectured every other moment. Lynette has her reasons, and I want for us all to get along. With a heavy sigh, Vaughan backed away a little. He seemed annoyed, but obeyed Fenrir's wishes nonetheless. If people hear her call you by your name, you know they will get the wrong idea, he started matter-of-factly. Lynette frowned heavily as she asked, What do you mean, wrong idea? I don't understand your human rule at all. Why can I not use his name? Giving her another critical gaze, Vaughan said unwaveringly, You are neither a goddess, nor are you a member of the royal family. Even nobles are not supposed to refer to him by name. He is not allowed to be friendly with anyone, for lack of a better word. What he does in private is neither here nor there, and he can be allowed some leeway, but in public, no one can be seen to be on equal footing to the king. I still do not understand why, Lynette laughed, folding her arms. It would appear to others that he is weak, favours certain people, which can be used against him. For him to allow a commoner, and one not even of his people, to call him by name, would insult every noble in his lands, Vaughan explained. He looked at Fenrir for a moment. He allowed a softness form upon his face for a short moment, before he returned to face Lynette. Fenrir then chimed in with, Not that I would personally care if they felt insulted. It's not as though they like me. But I believe I mentioned before, nobles are fickle like that. Fawn gave the man a rather sharp look before he continued, "Fickle as a cat, I agree. However, you should know better than to annoy your nobility. We do not need another war on our hands. I'm sure Sir Roy will agree with me on this." "Yeah, leave me out of your wars, please, Your Highness. My leg is still bad from the last one I stood by your side in," Roy said, glancing up from his tasks behind the bar. "So in other words, your nobles are a bunch of children, throwing the golden spoons out of their cribs if they do not get their way," Lynette said, wrinkling her nose. "And you have to keep them happy, but not spoil them too much. Like a fine line you have to tiptoe on." Nodding his head, Fenrir said, "I like that analogy, but yes, more or less. I have to be indifferent towards everyone publicly. It's quite tiresome. Making friends is quite hard when you cannot allow anyone at all to get too close, lest you risk them being hurt in some way. And then there is the risk that they are trying to fool me into thinking they are a friend when in truth they would stab me in the back if it got them riches and power." As a forlorn expression formed on Fenrir's face, Nat felt herself feeling almost sorry for the man. She sighed heavily and folded her arms. "Fine, I get it," she said softly. Arius had been silent the whole time, but he too felt bad for the king. However, he could not consider himself a friend of the king, like Lynette seemed to want. Even if she hadn't voiced it herself, he decided that he would keep this little conversation between the others to himself. Fawn seemed fine with Lynette's understanding and backed off from her completely. "Anyway, it is time for you to have a proper wash, Your Majesty. Come along," he said, almost pulling Fenrir by his arm. Watching the two, Lynette gave a curious trilling sound before she asked, "So why is it that you allowed to be so friendly with then? I mean, you yelled at him in public, came at him with a sword, and then fussed over his hair, and now you are taking him to be washed." Fawn stopped in his tracks, looked at the woman, and then faltered. Fenrir raised a hand to his lips and made a mocking whisper, which was not a whisper at all. "He isn't supposed to either. Don't tell anyone that he was nice. They'll laugh at him." "Oh, shut up," Vaughan said, his cheeks flushing deeply, despite how annoyed he seemed. "Move it, or I'll dump the hot water on you right here and now." Fenrir almost giggled as he began to escape Vaughan's wrath. Heading back upstairs where his bath was waiting, Vaughan sighed deeply, then followed the man up without another word. And that, my dear fellows, is the end of that chapter. So you can probably tell by Vaughan's my favourite. He just has that level of I'm not going to take shit from you, but at the same time I love you. Like you can clearly tell that he's like considers himself to be Fenrir's friend, and he just wants the best for the man. But he is by the books, and he's not going to take Fenrir's goofing off lightly. Anyway, I hope you liked that chapter. Yeah, you can. Yeah, as I said, you can definitely tell why I love Fawn so much. He's just, and it's fun to have a character that gets easily annoyed at someone's shenanigans. I mean, what are friends for? Anyway, that's it from me today. Hopefully, the internet works so I can actually upload this. Joys of having the internet being dumb, I guess. But anyway, I'll see you all next time. Take care. Bye.